Great, my name is Sean Lehane, and welcome to my talk. Today I'm going to be talking about digital transformation, broadly speaking. The title of the talk, From Black Box to Open Book. All right. So first off, got to thank the sponsors, of which I work for a company that's a little sponsor down there at the bottom, a little company called Kalamuna. I know that the founder of Kalamuna has been heavily involved with Badcamp for a number of years, and it's exciting to be here. And thank you to all the sponsors. Okay, so who am I? As I said, my name's Sean. I'm a senior program, senior project, senior product manager, basically just a senior digital person. I've been working in the space for 15 plus years, and I'm not a developer. I've got all these talks about code this, code that. I don't know what you guys do. So this is a talk about program management, really. In my spare time, I try to write horror stories, and I'm very much into cooking. Oh, and cats. If you're into cats, we can be friends. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about, as I said, digital transformation, specifically strategies that we, as program managers and digital leaders, can follow to adapt our practices so that we can be in a position to best deliver on the promise of digital and the promise of open source software to clients, especially clients in the government space. That's really where my focus is, and a lot of the examples are going to be from a government client. But this applies just as equally to enterprise, to basically any sector, is what I'm going to talk about. So in the beginning, I'm going to go over some common reasons as to why people and businesses undertake digital transformation. And I'm going to look then at major challenges in doing so, especially in a government context. And then lastly, I'm going to cover, which is the bulk of the talk, is the strategies that program managers can follow to tailor our standard approaches to, as I say, optimize our likelihood of success. So before I get started, I want to get a sense of the room here, and because we're all come from different kind of job sectors. If anyone works in government here, give me 2 claps. Wow, okay, I was expecting 0. Okay, all right, well, in that case, forget all those other sectors I mentioned. And then who works here in like a digital services agency? Excellent. And for government, or actually for anyone, who is facing a digital transformation? Or rather, who works with software that you feel is outdated or doesn't do what you need it to do? Yeah. Okay. All right, good, I'm in the right room. This talk should be then of interest to everyone. Because we all have systems and tools, right, that for one reason or another, they're not doing what we need them to do, or they used to do what we needed them to do, but they just don't do it anymore, and because they haven't kept up with our changing needs, or maybe they never actually did what we wanted to do in the first place, and we actually just adapted down to them. I have to do my job because this piece of software says I click this button and then that button, and that's my job. And yeah. But eventually, these are what we refer to as black box applications, or closed source applications. And when you're dealing with something like a black box application, eventually you're going to be put in a position where a change has to happen. These systems can't go on in perpetuity because entropy sets in. Eventually bugs will start mounting. Eventually, support will stop being available, and the system itself will just crumble under the weight of changing user needs and such. But change is difficult and it's expensive, and change is also very scary and risky, but it doesn't have to be any of these things if we approach it properly. So what are some of the common reasons why we undertake digital transformation? And there are a ton of reasons, but here are just some very common ones that I've found in my career and what we've seen at Kalamuna. You may be saddled, as I said, with a black box application in a larger system that's no longer compliant with the rest of the system, or your changing needs. And number 2, your product may be built with deprecated code, and you may not even be able to get support for it anymore. And I know we're facing that actually on another client where we're kind of stuck at Drupal 7 and we're getting really nervous. The third thing is this what did I say as the third thing? It's much easier to see this screen. Yeah. Okay. So 3, this could put you in a high-risk situation, especially if your system is a utility-grade system, which is my example I'm going to get to, or something with legal requirements for uptime. And 4, it could start acting, as far as you can tell, because you don't really have support and you don't really know what's going on inside of it. It could start acting unpredictably and unreliably, which leads to just extended downtime, panic, desperation for support. Yeah, you may not have any clear backup plan or any kind of plan B you could switch to in case something goes down. There's no disaster recovery. You're just holding your breath, hoping that everything just continues to work, which is a very dangerous position to be in. And related to all of this, you may not even own the product, right? Like most closed source software, you don't actually own it, you own a license to it. And you're not allowed to do anything inside, under the hood. You may not even own the data that you rely on as a business or an organization that this system is generating for you. And all this means, you lose your digital sovereignty. You lose your asset, your key assets. So all of these scenarios that I just mentioned, do we see? Yeah, good. All of these scenarios were in play to one extent or another for this government client that I've been working with, Calamuna's been working with for the last 3.5 years, which is the SF Bay 511 website, which I know we're in San Francisco. I see 511 everywhere. It's fantastic. And if you're not familiar, the 511, it's operated by the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and encompasses mainly the 9 Bay Area counties, covering 21,000 miles of roads and highways. The 511 Bay system, SF Bay system, is one of the most sophisticated and heavily used traveler information systems in the world, or at least in the United States, rather. And the MTC operates 511, which is a major real-time resource for nearly 8 million daily commuters and travelers in this Bay Area. So the most important part of the website, 511.org, is this real-time data that's coming in from all these different sources. What do I say here? It's pulled in from various feeds, both internal to the MTC as well as external partners and other data providers. And this website manifests all this real-time data in the form of issues, incidents, alerts, road closures, steer away from this road, go to this road, that sort of thing. All around the Bay. It's designed to be a utility-grade tool for commuters, and that's how the state government and the federal government that funds it believes it to be, utility-grade. And all this data is coming in and being processed and manifesting on the website through an API proxy application that we inherited when we started supporting the organization, and this was a black box system, let's just put it that way. And a very nervous system. And this is basically, the diagram of what it looks like. Data comes in, it gets manipulated, it gets cached, it gets presented on the web page. This system that did all of this, it was failing regularly when we took it over. And these outages were getting longer and costing more. And also mental health costs were skyrocketing. And a lot of late nights. This API proxy, it was a custom-built application using deprecated Python and Angular and a bunch of other things. And ironically, it started as an open source software. It started in exactly the way that we'd all love it to be. But it had become a black box because it was never properly documented. It was never really well supported by the people who built it. And the most annoying thing, new features were being added constantly, and old features were never being taken away or documented or anything. So it was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they were just hiding the old features from the front end, leaving us, when we took over, to just this code mess of what is going on? We're seeing features from 10 years ago, that sort of thing. So to say it was riddled with tech debt. It was nearly a decade old, excuse me, when we took it over. And so it had become a legacy nightmare for us. And it had become a legacy nightmare too for the MTC and for the people at 511. The most important aspect of the site, their whole system was failing. They didn't know why, they didn't know how, they didn't know what to do. And so both the MTC and Calamuna felt that the risk exposure here was just far too high. Like we couldn't keep going down this road. And so we had to replace it. And the MTC had some very basic requirements that I've got on the screen here. These are hardly requirements, but these very basic things, and I can't see on my screen. Yeah, so it had to be well-supported, well-documented, uptime guaranteed, whatever this new system would be. It had to be expandable, and it had to basically fix all the problems of the past system, don't have any of those problems, and it had to be open source. But, so, and this was great. This was exactly what we wanted to do. And the MTC is a big proponent of open source software. And the 511 site, it's been running on Drupal since 2018, 2019. They're a big proponent of open source. They have an open data program as well that's been running for nearly a decade. Most government agencies, though, even forward-thinking ones, like the MTC, so I'm just trying to make this bigger for you. Yeah, there we go. Still mostly follow the traditional practices in program and project management. And some strive to be agile, and a lot of government agencies say, oh yeah, no, everything is agile, we do this agile, blah, 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 agile, this, that. But depending on the agency and how it gets funded, there are laws and regulations in place that sort of confine and constrain government agencies in particular to follow older patterns or older frameworks and practices for reporting and monitoring and planning and requirements gathering and all this sort of stuff. That's really more suited to the building of a bridge or the building of a highway than it is for the actual building of a piece of software and maintenance and evolution of a digital product. So Agile is a framework, right? It's not a process, and it needs to be adapted to people, context, and desired outcomes in order for it to really work for anything. And this can be challenging in any context, and sometimes more so in a government context. I'll talk a bit later about how OSS is being embraced by governments around the world, but for now, it's just good enough to know that open source is not mandated by the federal government, it's not mandated by the state governments, it's kind of a wild west. Every agency is free to approach how they want to use open source software more or less on their own, in their own way. Now, when it comes to digital transformation, these are some sad statistics, especially as a project manager or a program manager, when failure is a known problem in delivering any kind of digital transformation, open source or not. Numerous studies and reports show that large-scale digital transformation projects fail to meet their desired outcomes in anything like their desired budget or anywhere near their desired timeline. The 2020, I'll skip that. Yeah, those are some pretty alarming statistics, and I've cited my sources there. So I am from Canada, and I'm down here in the States, and I'm working, obviously, mainly with a US client down the street. And the numbers that I just showed on the screen are sort of global, but they're really more US-based, but I don't want to just harp on American failures. So here are some Canadian failures when it comes to government digital transformation. So this thing on the left is called Phoenix. And what Phoenix is, it's this Canadian federal employee payroll and HR management platform that the Canadian government worked with IBM and CGI to build. After 8 years, its initial $300 million budget had ballooned to $4 billion, which is, in Canadian dollars, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money for anyone, but that's a lot for Canada, $4 billion. And even a few months ago, the amount of problems, it's never worked properly. And the amount of problems, failed payment processes, people getting paid on time, it's still about 400,000 problems a month. So back in 2019, the federal government, in their wisdom, and through a series of lawsuits, they were forced to distribute 4.3 million compensation hours to government workers across Canada. It totaled about 179,000 days of paid leave. They just had to shell out. And now, thankfully, they are phasing this system out for a brand new system they're budgeting at several $billion. So anyway, that's not going great. Another example from Canada is the ArriveCAN app, which I don't know if you've ever flown to Canada. It's basically the equivalent of the US passport, mobile passport app, where you get to do your declaration before you have to wait in line. So this thing was budgeted at $80,000, which was obviously an under-budgeted number. It's ballooned to $60 million, which again, Canadian dollars here. But this has been in the news as like such a badly run procurement process, a badly run backroom shady deals that the RCMP and several law enforcement agencies in Canada are investigating the government departments that actually went about building this app for things like negligence and fraud. So, Canada has got its problems. So, why do most transformations fail? So for as many reasons as there are to undertake a digital transformation, there are as many reasons why they fail. Most project failure boils down, though, to a couple of key examples here, key reasons. At the program level, so this is like us and our partners, our clients, there's a lack of cohesive vision and a deep understanding of the needs of users, both internal users and customers and clients. There's a disconnect between what the organization wants their product to do and the people who actually have to use it and what they expect it to do for them, what they need it to do for them. And number two, like in many government and enterprise organizations, there's resistance to change, right? And you couple that with a lack of strong change management, certainly in government, and you see that becomes a major issue. Three, when the need to reconsider and reprioritize arises, which of course in Agile and all projects it happens, it's like that's a principle. We're going to reprioritize and things will change. But when these needs arise, organizational leadership often just is not equipped to make smart pivots. There are people there to just sign contracts. They're not there to be constantly reprioritizing needs and such. Number four, this is a big one. Civil servants in leadership are often not the best equipped to make technology decisions, right? That's why they're civil servants in leadership. As a result, it's quite normal for them to contract with companies like us, companies like lots of agencies and partners. But because of their own internal lack of strong digital leadership, it's really hard for them to manage a vendor that has just come in, like an IBM that has come in and promised them the world, right? They're not able to really evaluate, are things even on track? Are we getting what we want? Because those vendors, like especially large-scale vendors, they're more interested in selling their product than they are with actually building something that taxpayers need or want. And lastly, as said, throughout government organizations often just can't have the most trained, highest equipped technical people, right? Like the private sector will always offer a higher paycheck for like the super duper technology people. So why does it matter? Like, why does failure matter? Someone actually asked me this. Who cares? It's government money. Just add it to the debt, whatever. Well, it matters because a loss of faith in digital systems leads to a loss of faith in government. Reports of taxpayer dollars, another quote here from Canada, reports of taxpayer dollars being wasted makes government agencies more resistant to even embark on a digital transformation because they don't want to be in the press. So you end up with that increasingly outdated systems or systems that just don't work for us anymore. So it's really up to us as digital leaders to do everything we can to improve delivery for our government agency clients. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears and talk about how we approached this problem, this digital transformation for our government client. And I'm going to focus this into three key areas that I'll go through. This isn't an introduction to project or program management talk. Instead, I'm just going to walk through these areas and walk through strategies that we've tested, we've tried, we've refined, and that I think is going to, collectively, will improve the likelihood of success. So the first area of strategies is fostering partnership. And these are strategies to help transition you from being a vendor to you being an actual partner. And why does this matter? It matters because partners are trusted. You're more willing to accept risks with a partner, you're more willing to listen to a partner, you're more engaged. The second area we'll look at is how to make considered, underline on the considered, technology choices. There are lots of different ways to make decisions when it comes to technology. Some of those decisions are really quick to make and they can be really, really bad. You know, like, oh, this is the cheapest thing, obviously we'll do that. Or this thing has the most features, obviously we'll do that. These are bad ways of doing it. So I'll talk about some other ways to help elevate the decision-making process. And then the last area I want to talk about is, how to go about helping to develop a growth mindset between government, your government client and your agency. Helps, always be looking at the bigger picture to help see long-term success for you and your partners. These are three, classic agile. These are interconnected. It's not like you do one, then you do the next one, then you do the other one, then you're done. This all happens simultaneously throughout a project and program. Okay. So first thing, okay. So I call this foster partnership because partnership doesn't just happen overnight. It's something that takes time to develop. It takes positive action and reinforcement to develop partnership. You may become a partner when some people sign some signatures on a piece of paper, but partnership is what matters, and that takes time. So the first point I want to say here is that it's about engaging the full community of stakeholders. And start by identifying the broader set of stakeholders impacted by your project, beyond just the PMs that you're working with or the POs that you're working with, directly overseeing your particular engagement. And like in many government agencies, the technology ecosystem is often very fractured. And like at the MTC, for instance, they have numerous siloed digital partners that support chunks of their ecosystem. And as a result, that can be challenging. So we really took it upon ourselves to try to lead and reach out to the other partners, reach out to other stakeholders, and continually sell this idea that we need for the sake of the agency to develop a full holistic analysis of the system. And a lot of these other consultants and stakeholders are like, why are you talking to us? You don't work with us. You should be talking to our boss who connects to your boss, blah, blah, blah. But after a little while, continually showing why this is important, and they started to talk with us. And we started to actually share information and knowledge about our different systems, and which made it a lot easier to understand the bigger picture. So as I say, the agencies usually or often have different PMs who are managing different chunks of this relationship. And on paper, from an organizational perspective, that may make it really easy for them to sort of separate things out. But when it's all siloed out like that, then no one is going to have a full, complete understanding of the entire system. And that's a really dangerous position for us all to be in, because even though you can keep your little chunk of the system updated and running smoothly, eventually, and it may not have any connection to any other parts of the system, but eventually, because it's all part of the same system, some aspect is going to change. Some update 6 months down the line on something that has nothing to do with us today will eventually impact us, or could eventually impact us, which is why it's important for an organization to have a full picture. And so if no one else has done this, if your government agency has not produced this and shared this amongst its internal and external partners, then you be the leader of it. And oftentimes the clients are excited, they didn't even know that they should do it. So it's about selling them this idea that we'll take it on for the good of the entire ecosystem. So the other thing is continually engaging this wider community of stakeholders, listening and sharing concerns, issues, future roadmaps, et cetera, it does a couple of things. It breeds trust and goodwill amongst different partners, and sometimes mistakes happen, and you really got to rely on lean into the goodwill of your partners to accept that a mistake happened. And the other thing is it'll make your plans stronger. Just having a stronger partnership amongst the digital ecosystem does that. All right. So the second point is about user needs over technical requirements. It's pretty easy with large-scale IT projects to get subsumed by requirements, or to let technology drive a conversation. We need to always remind our partners that technology is there to serve users, not the other way around. It's there to serve the needs of users. So we delve deep into user research to identify real needs and goals, jobs to be done, whatever. There are lots of frameworks that you can follow to identify real user needs as opposed to some top-down list of technical requirements. The people that are actually using the system, right? And it's not just end users, like this is a website with commuters, they have needs, but also the people running the website have needs. The people who are managing data have needs. These are all different user groups that you want to be able to engage with. And user needs in an agile sense become, they get translated and mostly into high-level business rules and requirements for the overarching system. So we work with stakeholders to itemize every user type and every user goal we and our clients can think of. Everything gets documented, scored, and prioritized. Like you can't, obviously, it's very hard to build a system that fully satisfies every user type and all of their goals. That's oftentimes not what you can build just out of the gate. But by having those documented conversations and scoring things in advance, then you're able, as a partner, to say, okay, we are not prioritizing this user type right now. These goals 5 through 7, we can't do right now. We'll revisit them in a year, whatever. We've consciously made that decision as opposed to, just forgetting about some user type or not even realizing that you have some user type that you need to service. So once gathered and established, we examine our options for how to actually implement a technical solution. So, and well, I'm going to show that in a couple of slides. But next thing I want to talk about is risk. And risk management is all about sharing risk management. And we have to share it. All too often, risk identification and analysis is done superficially in an RFP or bidding process. Or if it is done, it's done really comprehensively once at the beginning of a project and then not followed up on, not acted upon. It just becomes like a deliverable. And all too often, it's done in isolation by digital agencies or in isolation by some partner. It's not being shared, and then it becomes really hard for anyone to actually have visibility and accountability when it's not being shared. And this can lead, of course, to anxiety. It can lead to people withholding or downplaying risks because they don't want to look bad by sharing certain items, even really prominent items. I've done a lot of risk analysis, and there are two super common and super likely risks that happen on long-term projects. One is team turnover, be it on our agency or at the partner or whatever. And the other is risk of maternity leave or paternity leave. And yet these risks are just often ignored or just not documented. And even though they're extremely likely and they're extremely easy to mitigate. But if you don't mitigate them properly, it becomes really dangerous when some key person suddenly disappears on you. And also, has anyone ever heard of positive risk? Okay, I see another PMP nodding her head. Positive risks are a real thing. And obviously you document all the bad risks, but a positive risk, an example of that in construction is your building permits could come in early. That's a great risk that you could have. Because a risk is just anything that could impact your schedule, your budget, your scope. So you can have positive risks that can accelerate things, that can lower your costs, et cetera, et cetera. Positive risks become opportunities, like in a SWOT analysis, the way negative risks become threats. And the whole point of doing a risk analysis and a continual risk management plan is to continually minimize the likelihood of negative risk, and what you can't minimize the damage that those risks could cause, while simultaneously increasing the likelihood of positive risk and the magnitude of what positive risks could bring about. So the last thing I want to say about risk management is, again, the need to share it. Share it and be upfront. What we've found is, happens a lot. You don't want to say certain risks. You don't want to put certain risks down on paper. That's going to damage your reputation. But what I've found is it's a sign of character. And I've had clients that have been like, that was super honest of you to share those kinds of things. And in the spirit of that, here are my other hidden risks that will damage your program if I didn't tell you right now. And that's sort of, when you start building character and start building respect, that reinforces the partnership idea I was talking about. And I said before one last thing, but this is the last thing. Risk analysis has to happen continually throughout a project. Risks are time-based, typically. So, you could have a lot of risks in the beginning of a project that disappear by milestone 3. But then you get new risks that emerge. And I've just seen so many risk registers and risk plans that are really up to date for the first 3 weeks of a 2-year-long project, and then people just get bored of doing it. And it's not good. And so, as I say, doing this and continually will help establish your partnership in a really good footing. And it'll help you when you start building out a shared vision of success. It'll help break down some of the client-vendor divisions that directly lead to unrealistic expectations, expectation setting, lack of trust, low morale, low excitement, budget overruns, etc. So a key part of establishing and championing a shared vision that includes a planned investment in OSS solutions is knowing the landscape, so you can help navigate the client through the uncertainties that will arise along the way. There will be resistance to change in any agency. There will be resistance against using some framework or technology that isn't coming from a large brand, an IBM, a Google, or whatever. So it's important that we continue to champion OSS through all levels of communication to continually reassure that we are on the right track. Like the metaphor of a boat, North Star boat crossing the ocean, you're gonna meander a little bit, but as long as you continually are looking to the North Star, you're gonna get where you need to go. You may just meander, as I say, a little bit. The winds will blow. So one way that we did with sort of promoting OSS is really to show examples from around the world. And America is in a very unique position, but Europe is leading the way. Switzerland, for instance, now requires that all federal government software be released as open source. In Germany, there are several states are dropping Windows entirely. Just no one's using Windows anymore in Germany. Entirely in favor of Linux. And the European Commission is pushing for just EU-wide adoption of OSS first principles. Here in the United States, there hasn't been the same sort of federally top-down mandated approach to OSS, but we're moving in the right direction. For instance, the White House released a formal strategic plan around improving the security of open source solutions. CMS.gov, which is a confusing example for a Drupal event, that's Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services, is the first government agency to launch an open source program office. And the GSA is working to achieve 100% open source across their entire agency. And the GSA oversees some sub-agencies or sub-departments called 18F, the US Digital Core and the US Digital Service, all of which essentially help other government agencies navigate and develop open source solutions wherever possible. The projects here on the right are just a smattering of projects that I found. They're all publicly available open source projects from government, mostly centered around big data and libraries. So there's widespread desire on the part of governments globally and here in the US to adopt open source. We're getting there, it's just taking longer, and of course in America it's just done differently. Okay, so let's move on to making considered technology choices. Because there are so many different ways to leverage open source to implement any technical solution, including this project we did with the MTC, we need to review our technical requirements across the board in light of user research, right? We do this user research to create a more robust set of requirements for the digital products that we build, and to create a set of criteria that we can use to evaluate different technical options. There's a lot of different ways to accomplish anything. Obviously, we just need to be able to prioritize. When we do this, we prioritize users. That's a priori technical requirements that you get earlier in the process. They get refined, and we can create a more complete, holistic set of requirements that really tie to user goals, that tie to business rules, that tie to the overall value of the system. Remember that we started looking at the full digital ecosystem when we started engaging clients' various stakeholder groups. We have little to no control over other systems in the ecosystem, but we do have the power to persuade and to influence. So I'm sure you've all seen just a basic cost-benefit analysis, comparative analysis. This is an example of, this is sort of half true and half false, as an example. These are, when we actually sat down and we went through this big exercise, we really came up with a prioritized set of true requirements. That's what's here on the left. And then we looked at a variety of vendors, and I've just put some examples here. And vendors that could build, that we wanted to investigate. We also investigated just building a new solution entirely from scratch on our own. And we thought, hey, that'd be great for us to get extra money. And we completely failed, though. When we actually scored it all out, we were not capable of doing what we needed to do. And so, let's see. And yeah, this is just an example, as I said. And you can do it. You don't have to do it with numbers. You can do it through 1 to 10. You can do it with any kind of consistent set of criteria. You can color code. Here's an example I found of how to make a decision across what sort of CMS, content management system, that a particular website wanted to use. In the end, though, you need to normalize the different scales to be able to create. I think creating a point system is the easiest way, and because you got to be able to compare some of these things that are apples and some of them are oranges, but you need to get it all down to fruit. And that's why when we did it, we found that of the 6 vendors we looked at, us building it from scratch was like the 5th best option. And a shout out to what we actually ended up doing. So through this exercise, we identified a clear choice, which is a API gateway provider platform, open source platform called Tyke. And it's a universal SaaS management tool. And I don't want to go too much into that per se, except to say that when we started the process, they were not the clear front runner. We had, in our minds, we knew, oh no, it's going to be this guy or this guy or this guy. But by doing a rigorous analysis, a tool that many of us had never really heard of came out as the best. And the one thing I will say about Tyke is having been really good is it is a SaaS platform that's built on open source. They have a custom, you pay for the custom UI, the custom support offerings, but everything else is open source. And this sort of hybrid model is obviously very common. And there was a tool, in fact, that Kalamuna built many years ago called Calabox, which was a CI tool, I suppose, and that eventually, through the machinations of business, became Lando. So if you've ever used Lando, we built it. Or we built the original part of it. So it happens. So with all of this in mind, and these different strategies and such, get to work. We got to work. We built our API product. Everything worked fantastic. No budget overruns, no schedule issues, no issues whatsoever. And of course, by I say that, I'm kidding. Because all projects have issues that arise, right? Like there's, in the stats I showed earlier, most projects fail. Well, failure happens at the end, but issues arise throughout a process, throughout a major project, and It's all about how do you manage those issues? How do you manage communicating those issues to a client so that you can continually sell the idea that, this is just a bump in the road, we're still moving down the road, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, they say, I got a quote here, they say, courage isn't the absence of fear, courage is doing what's right in the presence of fear. So all projects, as I say, face challenges, big and small. It's how we manage. That's what matters. So, takes me to my final theme here in the final couple of minutes, which is around developing a growth mindset with your partner or your clients. Though technology and user needs may both seem like they're constantly evolving and constantly changing, these aren't excuses to avoid documentation. No one likes doing documentation. I'm attending a talk tomorrow about technical documentation. There's a common misconception amongst people in the agile space, or people who talk about agile, that, oh, in agile you don't have to document, which is not true. Agile documentation is described as being barely sufficient, but still it is sufficient. If our past, when we took over with the MTC, if those people had just been better at documentation, we may have been able to salvage. We may have been able to keep it going a little bit longer. But as I say, it's important, it's critical to keep up with documentation. Strong, readable architectural documentation, user manuals, diagrams, and the like allow people who are being added to the system over time to learn, get up to speed quickly, start using it quickly, and be able to start sharing their experiences using it. So you can start seeing how you want to improve it. Focus on seeking broader team training. Disseminate documentation to the widest possible team of stakeholders. This will help to ensure that other vendors and partners are aware of the intricacies of your product when they're changing their own products and prioritizing their own efforts over time. And it's critically important that you continue to demonstrate the value of the work you've done and how it contributes positively to your partner's future roadmap. So always be going back to their roadmap, be the champion of their roadmap, and they'll start seeing you as a guide, eventually as an indispensable guide, the only people that can truly take us forward because you know everything. You're the one who went and talked to the other stakeholders. You've built up this expertise and wisdom that becomes invaluable. It's not the number of features developed or tickets closed, but the amount of use the end user will see as a result. So, anytime you're trying to promote what you've done, talk about the value of a user's time and effort. Work to frame your client's perspective on your work. Demonstrate the value for further investment. And Agile's focus is on delivering usable software as quickly as possible, but responsibly. And it's meant to evolve through interactions with real users over time. Early wins lead to more wins because they improve the confidence and engender trust. So by doing these various strategies and over time and such, the MTC, we've shifted the needle with the MTC. They're more accepting and more open and more trusting of following agile practices. That makes it just easier for us to work with them and for them to work with us. And because of this successful work we did with this Gateway project, we and them have seen the program evolve successfully. Over the last year and a half at this point, we've undertaken a comprehensive redesign of the 5-in-1 website that about 23 hours ago I got approval on, signed off on. And we sort of this summer we kicked off the development of this brand new 5-in-1 system, new website rather. And our persuasive and constant championing of users, their goals and their needs has, the MTC, for instance, has really seen the value of really going and talking to users. Our view on prioritizing the full digital ecosystem has made us a trusted partner in their mapping and data spaces. And we've been given the green light to undertake complementary projects to migrate their website away from another closed source system. We're moving away from Google Maps to OpenStreetMaps, for instance. And our results have spoken for themselves, and the agency is confidently investing with us in new OSS technologies and really forming a long-term partnership. Last slide. Summary and some takeaways. So hopefully, you've gotten some good nuggets out of this. I know I've talked a lot of random things, seemingly random things. I want to leave you with 5 attitudes or mindsets or whatever, perspectives you can take away today. And look, 1, many of the reasons we've seen large projects fail tie directly to digital partners dropping the ball and failing to live up to our responsibility as digital leaders. It's not the fault of bureaucracies that they don't always have advanced technical talent in-house. That's why they hire us. We need to do better. 2, we need to focus on PMing, program management, project management, on higher order efforts, such as building the partnership, trust, and accountability in the program. Definitely still do technical PMing of monitoring budgets and creating tickets and stuff, but that stuff's a lot easier when you have a true partner in your client-vendor relationship. 3, put the needs of users first. The right technology will become much more apparent when you do so. 4, from a technical perspective in particular, we need to push, nudge, persuade everyone to be considering the full digital ecosystem when doing a digital transformation of any kind. Doesn't mean we're replacing everything or even responsible for everything, but we need to have a view on it as we build, a refined roadmap for the full system going forward. And speaking of the most strategic decisions, our goal needs always to be delivering the highest value, the highest value solution to end users first. Do all this, and I promise you, you're going to have improved stakeholder engagement, broader satisfaction, and excitement. And I think that will lead to more investment and success. I know I've used up almost all the time, but does anyone have any questions or comments on anything? Yes?
It's a comment. So I've worked at government in a variety of agencies for over 20 years and have been involved in a number of these projects in varying capacities and some spectacular multi-million-dollar failures. The thing that I would recommend to agencies, whatever, really push, demand to talk to the end users, because it is astonishing how late in the process.
A lot of government just doesn't want to talk to the people.
Yeah, and they'll be talking to somebody 3 or 4 levels above, and thinking, okay, they represent the, and then they'll finally come to the end user, and very early in my career I was involved in a project like that where we were like, the software didn't do one of the most important critical functions that we did on a constant basis, and they're like, well, we're a year and a half into the project, we can't change the specs now. We're like, we can't do our jobs at all if it doesn't do this. 2 years later, and another $3 million, they scrapped the whole project.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Have you, what did you do to get over, if you had noticed, any moment where nobody would make a decision because they were afraid of the government blame? Because, what I run into a lot of times is that there's a lot of people at the table that have similar shared risk or stake in the game, but not a single person wants to come out and make a decision, and so it stops all progress.
And I think a great approach for that is to bring those people together and just discuss that shared risk, and you shape a solution for them and help them see, okay, this. If you did X, this is how it's going to roll out for you, and highlight the value that is going to be created by making that decision. And because in their minds, everyone just goes negative. They go risk, like, I don't want to get fired. Okay, well, think about it you could get promoted. You could actually this could be the best example of a 511 in the country if we follow this through. And there's always risk. There's always a chance of something not working out. But it will you're guaranteed to fail if you don't try. So.
Absolutely.
Yes?
Can you tell me about your team structure of the project that you talked about? So how many people were involved and what the budget of the project ended up being?
The budget, I'll start with that, just south of $1 million. And the project was scheduled for about 10 months. And the team was under 10 people.
Including development?
Yeah, including developers. And the under 10, including 2 or 3 key, like, day in, day out stakeholders from the MTC.
And how many projects are you managing on top of that? Was that your sole project, or did you have other projects that you were also managing?
I have 4 or 5 other things, all goods on the go. All right. Oh, yes.
So, how much for each of your projects, how much time at a minimum do you set aside for user research?
Oh, it's more like a percentage. Like we do things based on percentage. Like a small project. Well, either way, it's hard to say the answer, but it's a big percentage. It's not trivial. You know, the development, basically at Kalamuna, for instance, the average project of discovery, design, development, it's about a third of the time goes into discovery, and about a quarter to a third in design, and sometimes more than that. And development, because if you do things really strong in the beginning, development becomes a lot quicker. So our development budgets are always the smallest. Yeah. Because we also eliminate rework, we eliminate guessing, and hidden stakeholders are already dealt with. They're all emergent. It becomes much easier to schedule work. You can actually, create a predictable sprint structure when you've actually done all the work in advance.
Thank you.
Anything else? Yeah.
I guess last question, is the development team involved in any of those initial discovery design conversations?
Yeah, we try to. And, it's not always the ultimate, when it gets really into the development phase, often will bring in specific front-end developer or specific blah, 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 kind of developer to do specific tasks. But there's always the tech lead who is part of the project all the way through. And he or she is directly overseeing, working with those developers by the time development starts rolling. So there's always the involvement from technology right from the start. So we don't accidentally start making promises and things that we can't do or aren't possible.
Yeah, that is super important actually on this, because when we were working on this, it was we had to be people with lots of